Everyone, this is Nikachu, Merfolk Master, and I'm here today to give the recap of GP Portland, the deck list, what went right, what went wrong, and I'll give a match-by-match analysis of the entire Grand Prix. And if you love the sound of Merfolk accomplishing, winning in competitive events, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel. So this is the list that I came to play at Grand Prix Portland. Very similar shell to a lot of the things I'm doing lately, but the biggest difference out of all of it is Harbinger of the Tides. We have to play with Harbinger of the Tides. There has been a shift in the metagame. We're moving to these Thing in the Ice, Phoenix decks, we're moving to Hollow One, we're moving to Infect, and we're moving to Grixis Death Shadow. All four of these decks moving up in big numbers in Modern. They're very prominent, and there's no other creature in this deck more effective against all four of those decks than Harbinger of the Tides. You want, against Thing in the Ice, you want to bounce it back to their hand. They actually cannot beat a Harbinger of the Tides and Aether Vial on the board. So if they work hard to flip their Thing in the Ice, the moment they attack with it, you reset it back to their hand and they get no value out of it. I've beaten some control decks where the only win condition in their deck was basically Thing in the Ice, and they could just never connect damage with me, and they lost the game because of that. Grixis Death Shadow. Now, Merfolk Trickster is fine against Grixis Death Shadow, and I think we have a lot of game, but I think that the needle tips way more in the Merfolk favor if we have Harbinger of the Tides bouncing Gurmag Anglers, bouncing Death Shadow at end of turn, so if they attack and connect with us, we can bounce the Death Shadow at end of turn and have 2 free turns to wail on our Death Shadow opponent who brought their life total super low to the ground. In addition to that, if they ever try to play Temur Battle Rage on any particular creature, boom! Harbinger of the Tides, bounce it back to your hand, you lost value. That's the value of Harbinger of the Tides. And like the best, it's very similar effect against Infect. If they ever try to play a pump spell, you can bounce the creature, or more effectively, you can, at end of turn, fight to bounce their only Infect creature back to their hand, and that gives you a lot of room to attack them for a few turns before they get the Infect creature out. Compare that with Merfolk Trickster. Trickster is fine against Infect because you can still apply pressure to the board while holding up interaction, like Gut Shot, Dismember, Deprive, Spell Pierce. But it doesn't interact with the Infect creature very well because you have to play this before damage in order to prevent the Infect. And if you play it before damage, then you're tapping out, and you give your opponent the opportunity to play like Blossoming Defense and then empty their hand of pump spells, and then they kill you. So Merfolk Trickster, not that great. If you don't know what's in their hand, it's not that great at interacting with our opponent's Infect creatures. Because if they play a Hexproof pump spell, then like Vines of the Vastwood or Blossoming Defense, then you're really ruined. So Harbinger, I think, has the plus against Infect. And Hollow One, you really want to be bouncing the Hollow Ones and the Gurmag Anglers and all those cards back to their hand to set them back, to buy yourself a lot of time. Whereas Merfolk Trickster just tickles them a little bit. Yeah, like Harbinger is just significantly more effective against those 4 decks that are rising to prominence right now in Modern. That's why I knew I had to put 3 in the deck. I was suffering in the Modern challenges because I didn't have as much game as I would like against those decks. So Harbinger of the Tides, I think, was a great addition, while still being a fine flash spell. I mean, it's not beautiful against control decks, but still 4 mana, you can apply more pressure to the board. And I did actually have games against Tron where I put my opponent down to 2, knowing that if they tap out for Ugin and wipe my board, I can flash in Harbinger of the Tides at end of turn and kill them for the last 2 points of damage. So that worked out very well in those matchups as well. What other big changes? I added Dismember to the sideboard. Again, Grixis Death Shadow kills Death Shadow sometimes because they don't want to put their life too low or else we can kill them. Kills Gurmag Angler. And it kills like Grim Lavamancer. The price is a bit high to kill the Grim Lavamancer, but it's still worth it. Great against Hollow One. You would rather lose 4 life and the Hollow One is gone than get hit for 4 damage And the problem is still on the board. So Dismember is very good against Hollow One. Kills Gurmag Angler with 1 mana, Hollow One for 1 mana, Flameblade Adept for 1 mana, which is fine because Flameblade Adept is probably going to hit you for at least 4 or 5 damage anyway. And it's really hard to block. So yeah, we've got Dismember for that, and also Dismember great against Infect. Just spot removal for 1 mana, very important against Infect, very powerful. Very effective, so Dismember was in there for that. And the last archetype, Death Shadow, Hollow One. Oh yeah, Thing in the Ice. So this thing can kill a Thing in the Ice if necessary. So I thought for all those reasons, I'm going to put some Dismembers in the sideboard. Can't remember what I took out for those Dismembers. Obviously nothing particularly important. But yeah, so I added Dismember to the suite in the sideboard. So to make room for the Harbinger of the Tides, I had to bump out 1 Merfolk Trickster, which I think is fine. Oh, Nikachu, how can you go less than 4 of the sacred new creature? Well, I mean, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to win. I mean, Merfolk Trickster's a great creature, wonderful, but I mean, I think the 3rd Harbinger of the Tides was more important than having a 4th Merfolk Trickster. 4 Merfolk Trickster is, I think 3 and 4 are very similar, but I think it's very important that I have the chance of drawing Harbinger of the Tides. I think there's a big difference going from 2 to 3 than 3 to 4. I mean, it's worth going from 2 to 3 on Harbinger of the Tides if I'm going from 4 to 3 on Merfolk Trickster. And certainly I could have removed a Phantasmal Image, but knowing that Harbinger of the Tides would play a big part in my strategy, I really wanted to max out on Phantasmal Images so I could copy Harbinger as many times as possible, and also copy all the other creatures as many times as possible. I know I took out Phantasmal Image before Mararegery, but Mararegery is just too clunky. I hate when I have Mararegery in my hand and I miss my 3rd land drop. I really want to put a Lord in play by turn 3 on curve. I really want to, and Phantasmal Image does that much more often than Mararegery does. So because we don't consistently get our 3rd land drop on turn 3 incredibly often, I went back to Phantasmal Image, and Mararegery's ability is still certainly good, but not enough for Phantasmal Image. And so therefore I took out also the Mararegeries to make room for these Harbinger of the Tides. So that's why we're running 3 Harbingers, we're running 3 Tricksters, which I think is perfectly fine. Merfolk Trickster, like I said, not interacting so well against those other 4 big decks coming up in Modern. I think it's fine against Hollow One, but it's not good against the Gurmag Angler Hollow One draws. But it's good against like Flameblade Adept. And fine against Death Shadow, but like, you know, those games are close. I need something that gives me an edge, an advantage, and that's why I went with the Harbinger of the Tides. So Harbinger, I was very satisfied with the results of Harbinger. We talk about Peak. People are very suspicious of Peak. Peak helped me win games. Peak determined my fate in some of the control matchups that we're going to talk about later. Like there was a matchup against Grixis Control where I saw my opponent's hand, and then I had to. It was like bolts and it was a bolt and Snapcaster Mage, and I had to set up my board. I had to pass the turn and set up my board so that both my Ether Vials were on 2, so that when I put a Merfolk in play, I could double my I could put Vial in both of my Merfolk to protect it from Lightning Bolt, and therefore protect me from their hand of removal, because I didn't really have any good interaction other than that. So Peak helped a lot when I drew it. I don't think I drew it as many times as I wanted to, but I still, when I drew it, it made a difference. It was the difference between winning and losing matches. So I'm still in love with Peak. And I think what helped me really a lot in this tournament was my control package. Again, 2 Spell Pierce in the main, 4 Deprive, 2 Venser, and Tectonic Edge in the sideboard and in the main deck. I played against 3 Tron decks, a Blue-White control deck and a Grixis control deck. That's 5 control decks. That's a lot. So that was the absolute dominant amount of my metagame that I played against in Grand Prix Portland, and I won all of them because I had a very strong control package. So overall, in Portland, I went 10-4, but let's also count the fact that I was playtesting this deck in the airport on Magic the Gathering Online, and I went a clean 5-0. So for the weekend, I was 15-4 with this deck. So it's like close to 80% in win percentage. It was a very strong list. I was very confident going into Portland, and I had a great result. I had over 70% for my result, and it was a great result. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to make top 8. You need to run. I gotta remind all of you, Grand Prix are about running super hot. You gotta play well, but you also have to run super well. You gotta keep playing Grand Prix until you get that one day where you're just invincible. People are mulliganing way more often than usual. You're never mulliganing. You're winning all the die rolls. Everything is going your way. Unfortunately, it wasn't that way for me this Grand Prix. I still think I ran well, but it wasn't like super, super hot that could take me to the top 8. What did not work out so well? Well, honestly, Mistcaller, I don't think it had a good showing in GP Portland. I played against only one deck where it would have mattered, and that was Counter's Company, but when I had Mistcaller, they didn't have Collected Company or Court of Calling in hand. They just didn't. And so, Mistcaller ended up just doing nothing. My opponent just went... it was like Heritage Druid into Duskwatch Recruiter, and then they use the Recruiter ability to find the Vizier of Remedies. They get infinite mana, they find the Ballista, they kill me. So they didn't, Mistcaller didn't do anything that game. I didn't play against Dredge, I didn't play against any Phoenix decks. That's another thing about Portland. I didn't play against any Phoenix decks. When there were a lot in the tournament, I was looking at the top tables, going into the later amounts of the round, and there was just Phoenix decks all over the place. I mean, they were everywhere. So I just happened to dodge the Phoenix decks. I didn't really see a lot of KCI. It was there. I didn't see it in abundance or anything like that. But I didn't play against KCI, and I also didn't play against any affinity decks. So that could have changed my win rate in a way. And one thing I would say overall I had good matchups. I ran well with good matchups. The only bad matchup I had was Counter's Company. That was hopeless. I got demolished horribly. Oh, Counter's Company, why are you allowed to have an infinite mana combo? That is nuts. It's just purely nuts. So I went X4, which should be good for cash, but I was bumped out because of tiebreakers. Lost my first round of day 2. And then so I got bumped out of cash. So overall, the deck is still very similar to what I would normally have. I would love to have, honestly, I have 10 1-drops. I would love to have 11. I always feel like I'm much more comfortable if I have 11. But I don't know what to take out. I think I'm willing to take out a Phantasmal Image. That's maybe the 4th. Phantasmal Image could be replaced by something else. Not sure what it could be. Could be a Singleton Dismember. Could be a Spell Pierce. Also, I would say, if you're in a metagame where Mistcaller doesn't matter, you could probably replace it with Spell Pierce. And although I am saying that Mistcaller was lackluster this GP, I might be underestimating the times it was just a 1/1 creature. And there were matchups where I could really use it. I was up against Bant Spirits in a round where in all the games that I played, I really needed I really needed Mistcaller to turn the tides to help me win, and I couldn't get it. It was unfortunate. Did not work out. So this is the list. I'm definitely going to be playing this in the Modern Challenge going on this weekend because I think it's really strong. So shout out to Steve Spellslinger Shields and Sam Magic Michaels, who I stayed with at a hotel near the convention center in Portland. Great guys. Fantastic Magic players who also did pretty well. I think they both went about X5 in the event. Still a very high win percentage. And unfortunately, we did great, but, not good enough to actually place in the cash or get the list published for that matter.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, badge for 4.
Hi, everyone. We are here with Sam Magic Michaels. We stayed together with Steve Spellslinger Shields, if you remember him from Pro Tour Hour of Devastation. We were there in Japan. And what have you been running at this Grand Prix this weekend?
We're running some Hardened Scales, some Scaly Boys.
Yeah, and if you can win a GP, we're going to rename you to Sam, Scales Master Michaels.
Oh boy.
That's going to be quite the upgrade.
I'll take it.
So why are you running this deck?
Honestly, I'm running because I couldn't get the stuff for KCI.
What? Are you serious? You are gross. We've been bashing KCI. You want to be scum like that?
I would do it. No. This deck is awesome though. It's fun. I don't know. It's a lot of math, and I mean, you know, you got stuff like this.
Get this. This guy's an engineer. He's putting things together here.
Yeah. I mean, that's the long and short of it. It's fun. It's math, and it's a puzzle.
Yeah.
Plus, it's good against all the tribal decks that are running
Puzzle.
around.
That's an aggro.
Aggro puzzle. Yeah, exactly.
And I should say also that, you know, Merfolk actually had a pretty good showing. There was 4 of us on day 2. One person, Dakota, went completely undefeated on day 1 with 8-0. He had a much more classical version of Merfolk with Curse Catcher, which I would love to experiment with, but I just haven't had the time to experiment with Curse Catcher again, because Curse Catcher could be making a comeback. Like all those decks I mentioned, like Grixis Death Shadow, Curse Catcher is good against, and Hollow One, Curse Catcher is good against. And I think Thing in the Ice Phoenix decks, I think Curse Catcher is going to be good there, because I think Curse Catcher is good against 2 mana spells, 2 mana sorcery and instant spells. So I think Curse Catcher might have some legs playing back in this format. So anyway, with that in mind, let's talk about round by round what happened. Round 1 I had a bye. Hooray! Planeswalker points, thank you very much. Always giving me a bye in every single event. You know, it's significant. The buys really help. I mean, if you dream about making day 2, try to grind your local events so that you earn enough Planeswalker points so that you get a buy. I don't know what the system's going to look like going on in the future. I think I heard Wizards said that they're going to make Planeswalker points more important going on in the future. I hope that's a reality. But as of right now, you know, Planeswalker points help you get buys going into Grand Prix, and statistically it makes a huge difference. So make sure you grind your events or play out a lot of events where there's a high multiplier. Like usually in Grand Prix, I play out, if I don't make day 2, that's fine. I just play out the event anyway for the Planeswalker points, and that helps you get buys for future events. So, and you get to sleep in, which I didn't really do, but what we did in round 1 is Sam Magic Michaels, I, and Steve Spellslinger Shields, we're going to a Denny's. We go to this Denny's for breakfast. We get there at like 9:05. We get seated at 9:15. And we know the round, I don't know, the player meeting was at 9. They're probably starting the round at 9:15. We should have like a good chunk of time. However, we order our food within 5 minutes. And we're waiting 10 minutes, the food's not there. Then we're waiting 20 minutes, the food's not there. We're waiting 30 minutes, the food's not there. Then all of a sudden it's 10 o'clock, and I'm like tweeting on Twitter, someone tell me how much time is left on the clock. I don't know how much time left is on the clock. Like, are they going to, is it to time? What is the time in the negative? But from my experience, the timer goes at least 10 minutes after the round has started. And then, after the round has ended, and then sometimes, or not sometimes, but, you know, at least 10 minutes, it can be a range of 10 to 20 minutes. So I know that if time has been called in the round for round 1, that we have at least 10 minutes to get back to the convention center to play our round 2, or otherwise we're going to get a game loss because of not showing up on time. So now we're getting really nervous. Where's our food? We have no food. And we eventually Simon Slutsky tells me there's 1 minute on the clock. Oh my god, we gotta go. We have to go right now. So we get up. We're going to abandon our order, and our food comes. And like, well, finally, but anyway, we don't have any time to eat this. We really have to leave. So they said, okay, no problem. We're going to pack it up for you. They pack it up. We pay. Turns out, because of Uber, a lot of people order food online, so they had 1 million online orders. Like the restaurant was packed anyway, but in addition to the restaurant being packed, they were serving millions of these online orders. I just ordered something simple, eggs and hash browns. So we run to the convention center. Everyone, this is Nikachu. I'm here with Steve Spellslinger Shields. He's down there. We're in a rush right now. We just came back from Denny's. Here with also Sam Magic Michaels. We're gonna learn about him later. So we go to Denny's. We sit down. We're there at like 9:05. We take 10 minutes to sit down. the place is packed, and we wait 15 minutes to order our food. The food comes like 40 minutes later, and then I'm messaging Twitter, I'm messaging, social media. When is round one ending? When is round one ending? Oh, we can see that Spellslinger Shields is not in a rush to get to round two because he has 2 buys. Let's go meet Sam.
Good times.
So, Simon Slutsky let me know that there's only 1 minute left on the round timer. That was like 5 minutes ago. Come on, Daddy, step up your game here. And so that was round 1. So anyway, and shout out to Simon Slutsky. Thank you for letting me know how much time there was left on the clock. Otherwise, we'd be stuck in that Denny's. Maybe we would have missed our round. Round 2, I get paired up against Blue White Control, and I brought the Nikachu playmat. Here's the Nikachu playmat. I was bringing out for the first few rounds, but for the first few rounds, everyone was recognizing me. So in round 2, my opponent recognizes I'm Nikachu, and turns out he's a friend of Tuxdev, who is a Merfolk Legacy Master. And anyway, my opponent's on Blue White Control. I slowly pick away at my opponent's life total, and they lose. Going into game 2, it was sort of interesting, because I peek and I see their hand. They've got Jace the Mind Sculptor, they have Planeswalkers, they have Terminus in their hand. And but I have everything under control. I mean, I have everything that I could possibly want. My opponent was sort of choked on white mana. They had 2 Field of Ruins that they could not use. I had all the blue mana in the world, so they had 2 Field of Ruins that they could not use. But if I remember correctly, it didn't matter in that game. They couldn't make use of any of the extra mana. However, it wouldn't have thinned their deck either of more useful cards, because I don't think I had Mutavault out in that game. I deprived their first counterspell. I deprived their first Planeswalker. I believe it was a Teferi, or maybe it was a Jace. I don't remember. I countered a Planeswalker with Deprive. Deprive, great card. And the next Jace hit the battlefield, but that was fine because it had no option but to die to my creatures. So we kill off the Jace. They got to Brainstorm, which made me nervous because I knew they had the Terminus in their hand, but they put it back on top, and then they fetched at end of turn, throwing away what might have been the Terminus, maybe. But I just ground them out comfortably. Turns out they didn't bring any counter spells to help protect their Planeswalkers. They had a bunch of cards in their sideboard I thought that they could have brought in against me, where I find people usually bring cards in against me, like Ancestral Vision, just for card advantage, and counter spells to help fight the counter wars when they're trying to resolve a Planeswalker. So basically, I got to fully fulfill my plan. My opponent didn't really get to play out their plan. I also remember they had a lot of Path to Exiles in Game 2, which helped find me a lot of lands. I was choked on mana. I didn't have a whole lot of mana that game, but slowly they gave me more and more mana to work with, which helped a lot. So anyway, that was round 2. Beat Blue Eye Control. Round 3, I'm up against Titan Shift. And so game 1, I lose the die roll. Not great, because I don't have a hand that has a fast clock. It's just it's a sort of Silvergill Adept, Merfolk Trickster, Harbinger sort of hand. No real pressure is what I'm trying to say. So I can't close out the game really fast, and my opponent just curved out completely. Goldfish to a win, game 1. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I know I have a lot of game now against Titan Shift. I've got the Phantasmal Images, I got the Peaks, I got Spell Pierce, and I'm bringing in Deprive and Venser and Tectonic Edge. I don't know if Surgical is worth bringing in. Maybe it is. It's just sort of weird. In order for it to be useful against Valakut, I need to Tectonic Edge the Valakut away, which I only have 2 of in the deck. Maybe it's fine to hit a Primeval Titan. I'm not sure. Because if I hit the Primeval Titan, they still have Scape Shift. So game 2, I had a very hopeful hand. I had Island, Tectonic Edge, Silvergill Adapt, and counter spells like Deprive. It was a pretty good hand. I liked the hand. It was a good hand. But the problem is, after I played Silver Gill Adept into Silver Gill Adept, I was not drawing my third land. I couldn't draw the third land. My opponent started playing Baloth, Obstinate Baloth number 1, Obstinate Baloth number 2, and eventually I draw Aether Vial, but come on, I need Aether Vial early in the game, not later in the game, and I'm able to stall the game out a little bit and start developing my board, but once I found my second blue source, I was just a bit too slow to do all this. I already took a lot of damage, and I went down to 2, and then eventually my opponent just killed me. Yeah, so not the greatest game against Titan Shift. Wish it could have been better, but it's a tough deck too. So that game did not break out for me. Round 4, I'm up against Grixis Control. Oh my god, Grixis Control. I have not seen you in a long time. I think in game 1, I just have enough resources to win. It was pretty close, though. It was pretty close. My opponent is playing with Tasigur, which was great because the Harbinger of the Tides actually helped a lot. I could keep resetting the Tasigur over and over again, which also made, which I also think was conflicting with a search for his Kanta that was trying to flip. So my opponent keeps filling the graveyard, then emptying it to play this Tasigur, and I keep bouncing the Tasigur with Harbinger of the Tides. So that worked out for me. Game 2, I don't remember how I lost this. I put my opponent down to 3, but they were just, I believe a search for his Kanta ground me out, and I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't have enough interaction. If you're just going to have a bunch of creatures, then you're just going to die to their interact. There's no creature deck that's going to beat a control deck. You need to have interaction. You need the Tectonic Edges. You need Spell Pierce. You need to draw the things that are going to help you win the game. And I could not interact with my opponent, and I lost. And game 3 was the interesting one because it was a game where, again, I don't have like tons of interaction, but I do have something. I have 2 Aether Vials, and I do have 1 Deprive. I peek my opponent, and they show me like Snapcaster Mage, Lightning Bolt, I think a Kolaghan's Command that doesn't matter, because they only have like 1 red source out, or 1 red. They're constrained on mana. I think a Spreading Seas was doing work against them. And they only had 3 lands out. That was also very important. They had only 3 lands. So they could bolt, and then at the next turn play Snapcaster Mage Bolt. This was my concern. So what I had to do is I needed to set up a situation where I have my Aether Vials on 2, and I have 3 Lords in play. And I had to pass the turn, and then get into a situation where I play my Lords, and then empty my hand of Lords, and then be protected from the stupid Lightning Bolt strategy. And then if anything goes wrong, I played Deprive on it. And this strategy worked out. I had 3 Lords in play that my opponent could not deal with, and that was enough to seal the deal for victory. So I won against Grixis Control, and I think it was largely due to peak. I would not have played so patiently around this Lightning Bolt and Snapcaster Mages if I didn't have the peak in my hand to see that they had this sort of hand. Otherwise, I might have played. I would have played less conservatively. My opponent had a Vendilion Click out and was actually attacking my life total. The game finished with me at 11 life. But there are all sorts of lines where if my opponent gets me down low enough, then they can suddenly play Bolt to my face and Snapcaster Bolt my face. So it's a dangerous matchup. But anyway, I won against Grixis Control in round 4. Boggles, round 5. My opponent asks me to sign their playmat as I sit down. I also remember I was very frustrated. I wanted lunch by round 5. I need lunch, so I stand in line for a piece of pizza. I want to buy a piece of pizza. The pizza's $7. It's $6.45 a slice, which is pretty expensive. And I see people walking away with this dinky slice of pizza. It's not even like a quarter of a pizza. It's like I don't know, a sixth of a pizza or something. I'm like, you paid $7 for that? I'm like, to hell with it. I'm not buying that pizza. So I get out of line. I go to some burger joint around the corner. So I order my burger, and I'm waiting 20 minutes for the burger. Burger finally comes. I'm getting really unlucky with food that day. It was terrible. Just so unlucky with food. And I get my food just as the pairings for the round start. So I don't get to eat my food. And they said, just because I waited so long, they gave me a ton of extra fries, which is not helping me because what am I going to do with all this food? And I decided, okay, I'm going to very carefully put it under my chair for round 5. So I go to my round complaining about my food. Boggles player recognizes me. I signed the playmat. Unfortunately for my Boggles opponent, they were learning, the downside to Boggles is that it mulligans a lot. My opponent said, this deck never mulligans like this. But, I know from my own experience, if you have like 12 win conditions in your deck, then you're just not always going to draw them in your starting hand. You have to mulligan them. I don't know what his mulligan issues were. Maybe it was no land, maybe it was all land. But anyway, my opponent mulliganed every single game of this match. So game 1, I believe my opponent had like just really bad starting hand, and I just wiped them out. But game 2, I couldn't really get anything going. They had a really good starting hand. I might have been greedy. I wanted to get more pressure on the battlefield. I think I played something on turn 2, and then I had to deprive mana for turn 3. But like I have no clock in play, but I can deal with what's on the board right now. There's like a Boggle with just like, I don't know, the green totem armor, the white totem armor. It's not dangerous yet. So I decided, okay, do you know what? Even in the face of Daybreak Coronet, I'm just going to play more like Lords on the battlefield. I think I remember game 1. Actually, no, game 1, I spreading seized them to death. That was what helped. That's what helped me win a lot. And then I just steamrolled them. So spreading seas was a big deal in that game 1. Game 2 on the draw, not nearly as big of a deal. And anyway, they play, what's it called? Gives the creature, I think, pro creatures. It's the aura that gives them pro creatures. So now I can no longer block this creature at all. And I was dying in like increments of 4. My life total goes from like 20 to 16 to 12 to 6 to death. So their clock was actually pretty slow, and if I just countered this one aura that made them unblockable, probably I would win that game. But anyway, I lose that one, and in game 3, oh my god, my hand makes me nervous. It's not that great. It's like some islands and a bunch of lords. That's all it is. It's just a bunch of lords, which can win. It's like okay, and I think maybe I had a spreading seas as well. But the point is, so I've got somewhat of a clock. It's a pretty good clock, but the problem is I have no interaction from my opponent. I keep the hand anyway. Fortunately, my opponent has a very interactive hand and not a really powerful hand themselves. So I have all the aggression, no interaction. My opponent actually has no aggression and all the interaction because they play like 3 Path to Exiles on me, exiling Lord after Lord after Lord. And I have a million Lords. I keep drawing Lords and I keep playing them. Lord after Lord. Lord turn 2, Lord turn 3, 2 Lords turn 4. And eventually it does get the job done. But once my opponent starts drawing auras, it's not enough damage. They get me down to 1 life, and I clean them out for 2. But so yeah, very interesting game. So going into round 6, I'm up against that kid, Kiefer. I can't remember what his name is. But round 6, Bant Spirits. I believe I win the die roll, but I don't have anything to do on turn 1. I've actually a very similar hand to what I said in the Boggles game just last match. It's a hand of Lords, and it can goldfish pretty well, but it doesn't have a 1-drop. So turn 1, I play a Lord. Turn 1, my opponent plays Noble Hierarch. Turn 1, I play Island. Turn 1, they play Noble Hierarch. Turn 2, I play a Lord. Turn 2, they play Drogskull Captain. Turn 3, I play a Lord, attack for 3 unblockable. Turn 3 for my opponent, they play 2 Phantasmal Images copying Drogskull Captain, attack me for 4. On my next turn, I play, I believe, 2 Lords and attack my opponent for 8. And so now I'm at 16 life, and I also. No. I did not play 2 Lords. I just attacked for 6, but I have lethal anyway. Because I peeked them, and I saw that they have Collected Company, Spellqueller, Mausoleum Wanderer. So the Spellqueller, Mausoleum Wanderer, they don't matter, they don't kill me. So my opponent needs to Collected Company and find 2 Lords to kill me, otherwise I kill them. It's Quentin Kiefer. Quentin finds 2 lords with the collected company, I lose. So that was a matchup where I could really use Mistcaller, just even as a 1-1. The 1-1 would help a lot, and of course it would counter the collected company. So that was a matchup I needed Mistcaller, didn't have it, lost game 1. Game 2, I had a really greedy 7-card hand that I wanted to keep. It was like it was a 1-lander with Mistcaller. It had interactive cards. It had like Merfolk Trickster. I had Silvergill Adept to like draw more cards. I think Phantasmal Image. I don't think it had any lords. But might have had a Harbinger of the Tides as well. But the point is, also had 2 gut shots. So that was appealing. 1 Mistcaller, 2 gut shots, 1 land, Merfolk Trickster, Silvergill Adept, something. I'm on the play. It's sort of risky. What if my opponent has no 1-drop? Anyway, I mulligan it, and then I get a no land 6-card hand. I have to mulligan down to 5. And it's a lousy 5-card hand. It's like, I think it's 4 lands and just something, or maybe it's 3 lands and like 2 like rubbish cards, but no real pressure. And I just get rolled. My Quentin Kiefer has like a reasonable curves out, just destroys me. So that's where you need to like run better in a Grand Prix. Things need to break your way more often. Maybe that was a keep. I don't know. It just felt a little bit too greedy for me. I don't think Bant Spirits is such a bad matchup that I should keep that sort of greedy hand. If I mulligan to 6 and I have a reasonable like 2 land, bunch of lords and 1 Mistcaller hand, that should be enough to win the game as well. So anyway, that matchup didn't work out. So that was round 6. I'm now XN2. So I need to win my next few games in order to make day 2. Round 7, I'm up against Red Green Eldrazi, and I don't even know what I'm up against. My opponent plays like turn 1 Noble Hierarch, but doesn't actually do anything much in this game. Seriously, they had trouble. I think what happened is I Spreading Seas their colorless source in game 1. It was a Carplazan Forest, and that might have been why they could not play any Eldrazi. But really, they didn't really do anything. Like, we were going into like turn 5 and 6, and still there was no pressure on the board. And I think at the very end, maybe they play a Thought-Knot Seer. I was pretty certain, or did they even play a Thought-Knot Seer? Maybe it was just a Bloodbraid Elf. But I was pretty certain it was I was up against Red-Green. No, I know that they're up against Red-Green Eldrazi, because we did have a game. Eventually, they get their game going. The Thought-Knot Seers do come out. Because I win game 1, and in game 2 they've got no game. I spread it. They have to mulligan to like a one mountain hand, and I Spreading Seas the mountain, and then they just don't do anything for the rest of the game, and I beat them. So like that was a crappy game for them. I need more games like that in order to make the top 8 of Grand Prix Portland. So my poor opponent. Then we go to round 8. Oh my God, this was a nerve-wracking round. I mean, yeah, we're playing for day 2, but I'm up against Hollow One. So in game 1, I lose the die roll, and my opponent just curves out perfectly, as perfectly as you could possibly imagine. We're talking like turn 1 Flameblade Adept, turn 2 Burning Inquiry into Faithless Looting, putting Flamewake Phoenix and Bloodghast into the graveyard by also playing a Hollow One on turn 2, and then turn 3 playing Gurmag Angler, and I think putting another Bloodghast in the graveyard somehow, and Flamewake Phoenix comes into play, and my God, was I under a lot of pressure, and I was able to stabilize a little bit with Merfolk Trickster and Harbinger of the Tides, but it wasn't enough. My opponent had way too much momentum in their favor, and I end up losing game 1. And I'm like, oh my God, am I going to lose to the Slot Machine deck? Really? The Slot Machine deck? Hollow One? So, game 2 works out much better in my favor. It's very close, though, because my opponent has very good hands. And I was being choked on mana. Okay, so I've got this I have this really weird hand where I have an Aether Vial in play, and I have a Master of Waves in hand, and I think 2 Aether Vials. And I want a 4th land. I need a 4th land, please, so I can cast this Master of Waves. I can't draw the 4th land. And I keep drawing Aether Vials, and I don't want to play the Aether Vials just in case my opponent plays Burning Inquiry. My opponent plays Burning Inquiry. Great. Let's exchange these bad cards for good cards. Let's get back into the game. I draw Silvergill Adept, Lord of Atlantis, Master of the Pearl Trident. What goes to my graveyard? Silvergill Adept, Lord of Atlantis, Master of the Pearl Trident. So I'm still stuck with these stupid Aether Vials and this Master of Waves in hand. But I slowly tick my vial up to 4, helping me stabilize a little bit against my opponent. I think what also helped is that they attacked their Flame Blade Adept into my Master of Waves. I'm like, let's do it. Let's block this thing. It dies. They forgot that Master of Waves has protection from red. That helps, and I am able to squeeze out a victory against Hollow One despite having like a really terrible hand. Then we go into game 3, and I mean, this is really nerve-wracking. And we have to play really fast. We spent so much time on die rolls for Goblin Lore, and Burning Inquiry. We're running super, super low on time. But what happens is I keep a 1-land Ether Vial hand on the draw. My opponent plays turn 1 Burning Inquiry. I'm like, okay, this can't be too bad. I just hope I don't lose the Ether Vial. So I discard my land and 2 other cards. I look in my hand. No lands! I have no lands in my hand. I'm like, oh my god. Is this how it's going down? Is this my demise? And I know Hollow One is a good matchup for Merfolk. I've beaten this deck so many times. Like, Burning Inquiry is supposed to favor Merfolk because you exchange cards from your hand for like, you don't really get mana screwed against Hollow One because Ether Vial is guaranteed mana no matter what. So it doesn't matter how many lands you lose. But anyway, so I draw my card for the turn. It's a land. Excellent. We're in business. I play the land. I play Ether Vial, so I know I can guarantee getting some creatures out over the next few turns. And my opponent didn't. I don't know. They played an They don't know my hand. They don't know I have 0. They don't know I don't have any more lands in my hand, and they play Engineered Explosives on 2 for their next turn. Because if they played it on 1, they could have blown up my Ether Vial, and that would have been a big deal. But they play Engineered Explosives on 2, I think because they don't know that my hand doesn't have any more mana other than this Ether Vial, so that was really lucky for me. The Ether Vial on 2, not that big of a deal. I mean, I can play a few Lords out, but the big deal is Master of Waves, which is going to take over the game eventually. So we play a super fast game. I exhaust my opponent's Engineered Explosives, and they just couldn't get enough of a game going. They didn't have that fast start. They had a really slow start. They might have played Gurmag Angler once that game, but they didn't have any real pressure, nothing significant. So that gave me a lot of time to get my Ether Vial online, to get my creatures on the battlefield. I had the game under control. I remember one critical turn, I was able to Surgical Extract a Flame Blade Adept from their graveyard. This might have been game 2. This might have been game 2, not game 3, because I don't think they had this Gurmag. They might have. It might have been like they had a hand of... they might have had one Gurmag Angler and this Flame Blade Adept, and I was able to Surgical away the Flame Blade Adept, and then nothing else mattered after that. And my creatures were just much more important than their creatures. So, we make day 2. I win the game. I make day 2. Hooray. So going on to round 9. I'm up against Infect, which I feel confident in. I feel confident because I've got a lot of interaction. We've got the Dismembers, we've got the Gut Shots, and so yeah, I'm confident going into this game, this match, and everything sort of does work out like I want it to. Harbinger of the Tides was the star of the show. I Harbinger back my opponent's Blighted Agent. It didn't matter in the long run. I did play Harbinger of the Tides, but then they start playing like more Infect creatures. But I do have Ether Vial and Phantasmal Image in my hand. And do you know what? I've actually changed my opinion about Phantasmal Image in the Infect matchup. I think Phantasmal Image is good because it can copy Merfolk Trickster, because it can copy Harbinger of the Tides. And you know what? You can play Phantasmal Image at sorcery speed if you copy Harbinger of the Tides, because bouncing stuff on your turn is still pretty effective. And my opponent tried to go for the win by pumping up one of their creatures, but you know what? Yeah, I Violent Phantasmal Image, copy Harbinger Tides, blew them out by bouncing their creature. Then in game 2 did not work out so well for me. I did have some interaction, but it was very hard to deal with my opponent's creatures. Actually, okay, I had a lot of interaction. I had 2 Gut Shots. And I thought, you know what, this hand is pretty good. 2 Gut Shots is going to be good. If I kill even 1 Infect creature, that could be the end of the game. Seriously, if they play 1 Infect creature and they can't protect it, and they have no other Infect creatures, I'm just going to roll my opponent over. And if they have 2 Infect creatures and I kill them, then they're dead. So they play like I think turn 1 Glistener Elf, gut shot. Turn 2 Blighted Agent, gut shot. But then they play Inkmoth Nexus. Okay, well, I have no answer to the third Infect creature. Then they play another Inkmoth Nexus, and I don't have like any pressure. And I have to tap out now to play my creatures and try to race the Infect opponent. But racing did not work out at all. My opponent just activated Nexus, pumped it up, killed me. So that was game 2. Game 3 was unfortunate. We both mulliganed down to 5, and I asked my opponent, "Who does this favor more?" I'm not sure. And I had an okay hand. It was interactive. It had nothing on turn 1. It was all turn 2. It was all 2 drops, but it had things like Harbinger of the Tides and Merfolk Trickster, which could be interactive. But unfortunately, my opponent played like 3 Noble Hierarchs, which made any attack with their Infect creature very powerful. It's like they had a free pump spell every single turn, and I could not deal with that. I couldn't curve out. I also had a Venser in my hand that never saw 4th mana, where I needed the 4th mana a lot earlier and not a lot later. And I did put pressure on my opponent. Got them down to 8, but it wasn't enough in order to close out the game, and they won it. So lost to Infect. A little bit disappointing given how much... given the suite of cards that I prepared for them, but it was a close match. So round 10 against Tron. So my opponent is like, I don't know, in their 60s or something like that, and they look so familiar. Like I played them at Grand Prix Las Vegas, and I asked him, "Have we played before?" And he's like, "No, I don't think so," because I'm thinking in my mind, this is the Tron player from GP Las Vegas. So my opponent starts off playing like Urza's Tower, and I'm like, "Are you sure you're not this person I played in Vegas?" But it wasn't the person, because this new person in Portland was playing with a foil Tron deck. I don't really have much to say about this match. I just killed them. Everything was under control. I didn't feel like I was in any particular danger. Of course, Spreading Seas and Tectonic Edges and Deprives all kept the game in my favor. My opponent just couldn't do anything. I have, I think, a very favorable amount of interaction where Tron is in a lot of trouble. Spreading Seas, of course, huge bonus against that deck. So yeah, I just very cleanly defeated Tron with all my interaction. So round 11, I'm up against a Rock player, which I feel pretty confident in playing against. I can't remember how game 1 went. It was in such a way that... like, I didn't get dented. Nothing happened. Oh, I think they mulliganed to 5, so they were actually... They were lacking a lot of interaction. And I was able... Like, I just had an abundance of interaction, so I won game 1. And in game 2, it was pretty interesting, because... okay, I do actually have something to add for game 1. In game 1, they did mulligan a lot, but they were mana screwed. I kept Spreading Seasing every single mana source that they put out, except for the 2, two Field of Ruins. So they played Treetop Village, Spreading Seas. They play black-green. They play, was it Blossoming Marsh or something like that? The black-green land? Spreading Seas. They play like 2... with their green lands... With their lands, they did play like a Tarmogoyf, but they can't do anything with it because there's nothing in the graveyard. They play, 2 more Field of Ruins, but they have no way of activating it because I have islands in play. Then they play... Oh no, I also had a Boro, but they couldn't do anything to the Boro because I can just bounce it back to my hand. They play another Treetop Village, another Spreading Seas. So I have 3 Spreading Seas, their hand sucked. That was the end of the game. In game 2, we actually have a much more interactive game. They play Dark Confidant, but I kill it with Dismember. We do have quite a bit of a game. They have Kitchen Finks in play. I play creatures. I play Master of Waves. They play Damnation on me. That sucks. So I lose my board. Their Kitchen Finks dies, but comes back, gains them life. And then, but I reassemble. I still have a lot of cards in my hand. I keep Ether Vial in the deck, but they blew it up. They actually blew it up with Maelstrom Pulse because they saw the threat of me going from my Ether Vial to 3 to 4, and if I Vial in Master of Waves, then they're gonna die. And that's the thing. I want to attack rock players at instant speed. They've got a lot of sorcery speed removal, like Maelstrom Pulse, Collective Brutality, Liliana the Veil, and Liliana the Last Hope. Those cards aren't going to be good against Master of Waves. So if I Vial it in play, make a million tokens, and attack them to death in one shot. So they recognize the threat Maelstrom Pulse, the Ether Vial, and then the whole sequence of hard casting Master of Waves into a Damnation happened. But I rebuild, I play more creatures, I play another Master of Waves, and I'm able to protect it with Deprive. I have enough lands in play, thanks to a little bit to Assassin's Trophy, that the my opponent plays. They have a board full of big creatures, and they play Languish, and I deprive it, saving my Master of Waves, and Master of Waves was just enough to win the game. I believe my opponent had a Scavenging Ooze out, but I was able to bounce it with Venser, and they had they had the dilemma of tapping out their green sources in order to gain a bunch of life, but it wasn't enough. Master of Waves was enough to win the match for me. So yeah, I beat Rock. Comfortably beat Rock. Round 12, I'm up against Ad Nauseam. Game 1, I can't interact with their combo. They find their combo, they win. Game 2, I do interact with their combo. I have enough interaction in the form of like Deprive and stuff in order to make it work. Game 3 was the interesting one because I peek them and I see that they have actually quite an empty hand. They just had a bunch of mana but not enough combo pieces. They had like an Angel's Grace, a Simian Spirit Guide, but they had nothing else other than that. And so because of that, I'm able to comfortably win. Because of that, I don't give them any time. I actually should say that. When I peek and I see that they have no interaction, all right, let's go. Let's empty our hand of all our creatures. I like Vial in this creature, play Merfolk Trickster at end of turn, because there actually is a danger to emptying your hand onto the board against Ad Nauseam because they now play with Bontu's Last Reckoning. They do play with sweepers now, so you have to be careful. You don't want to play. You want to be playing around the sweeper a little bit against Ad Nauseam. So now that I know they have no sweeper in hand, they have no combo pieces, no if good combo pieces in hand. I do have a Deprive in my hand. Let's empty our hand. Put our opponent, because they are at 16 life, or maybe 12 or something like that. I want to make sure I get their life total to 0 as quickly as possible to exhaust this Angel's Grace out of their hand, which I do, and they do play a Phyrexian Unlife at one point. I deprive it, so I don't give them any extra turns, and that was enough to win the match. So beat Ad Nauseam. Round 13 against Counters Company, I get crushed. Just crushed. So game 1, I have what I think is a good hand. I've got Mist Caller, I've got Lords, I've got Pressure, but unfortunately it's not good against turn 2 Devoted Druid into Duskwatch Recruiter, finding Vizier of Remedies in your top 3 cards, playing the Vizier, infinite mana, look for Walking Ballista, cast it for 20 and kill me. And then in game 2, I had not a very good hand. I mean, like, I had an okay hand, but they had like a bunch of Path to Exiles. They had like a value-based hand of Path to Exiles and Kitchen Finks and Eternal Witness, get back Path to Exile. They just ground me out, to be honest. They just ground me out. I could have used Mist Caller in that game because they did play Collected Company, but anyway, I didn't win. It was a slaughter. It was a slaughter. Absolute slaughter. I didn't want to play against those decks. Round 14, I'm up against Bant Spirits. That's great. I feel confident here. I don't really remember how game 1 went, except that maybe I think I saw their hand with Peak, because I did write down like their hand of Reflector Mage, Wanderer, Island, Canopy, and Captain. Maybe I just knew that I had a clock that could beat them. Game 2 was very interesting, though, because we both have an Ether Vial hand, but my opponent doesn't play any more lands. They're stuck on 1 land, and they put their Ether Vial immediately to 3. And all of a sudden, I'm in a situation where I have like Venser in my hand, and I put my Ether Vial to 4, and I have a choice between Venser and Master of Waves. If I go for Venser, it's sort of a greedy play. If I bounce my opponent's Ether Vial, they're certain to lose. But if I go for the Ether Vial play, and they've got a Lord, then I'm going to lose, because they're going to race me effectively. If I go for the Master of Waves play, and they have Reflector Mage, I'm going to lose because I slow myself down too much by playing the Master of Waves instead of the Venser. So I guess like I don't know which one is the best one, but I end up going with Master of Waves. I put a bunch of tokens on the board. My opponent just does not have the Reflector Mage in that case, and cannot draw the second land in order to get victory, and I end up winning that one. So beat Bant Spirits, and now we're up round 15. Try to go X4 in order to win some ticks. We're up against, win some money and have a decent performance. I'm up against Tron. I'm super delighted. Great. You know what? I'm glad that Merfolk has a very good matchup against Tron. Tron is a super popular deck. You know, if you're playing Bant Spirit so that you have better game against KCI, that's a less popular deck. You want to be prepared against Tron. We've got great game against Tron. I went 3-0. You guys see me win all the time in my matches online, beating Tron all over the place. So yeah, that and nothing changed. I believe that my opponent like mulliganed sort of poorly in game 1. But I know Spreading Seas had a big impact on that game. I just Spreading Seas a few things, and then, you know, I put a lot of pressure on the board. My opponent couldn't deal with it. And then in game 2, I just slowly, patiently won the game. Just slowly apply pressure, put creatures on the board, attack for 2, attack for 2, attack for 2, hold up counter spells, play Spreading Seas, play Tectonic Edge, played a very patient game, just chipping away my opponent's life to a little bit by little bit until they lost. And so that was my tournament. And you know what? I think this list is very well positioned. This is what I'm going to play at the Modern Challenge later this week. So I hope you like it. I liked it. I think the deck is well positioned. I think Merfolk is well positioned, and I hope to see how Merfolk is going to do in the coming weeks and months. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. This has been Nikachu with my review of Grand Prix Portland.